Hello and welcome back to another episode of Inside the Asperger Studios. Once again, I am joined by Lila Freshen, a 30-year ASD specialist, founder of the ABA Toolbox, and a global advocate for accessible education. It's always a privilege to have her back. So sit back, relax, and grab your favorite beverage, and let's listen up and learn more about her. See you there.
I wanna believe in the truth, but only see what I'm shown. Got the freedom to choose, but can't decide on my own. Follow what the group is thinking, bottle up my intuition till it's popping up.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of Inside the Asperger Studios. Today I'm joined with a good friend of mine who you've seen before in the show, Lila Freshen. Welcome to the show, Lila.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Reed. I really appreciate it, and I appreciate seeing you again and being in this platform with you.
So let's refresh people a little bit about yourself, and then we'll get going.
Sure. So I'm Leila Farshtian. I've been a disabilities care provider specifically with autism spectrum disorder for the past 30 years. And I have a private practice in northern New Jersey, and there were a group of about 70 providers, and we are servicing the northern New Jersey area. And I'm the founder of ABA Toolbox, soon to be Circathera, Circle of Care. And we'll be launching the Circle of Care later on in 2026. So we're excited about that. And we are a disabilities care engine for providers and educators who service individuals with autism in clinics and in schools. And I'm excited about that. And then another initiative is that I'm the chair of education and the co-president and the UN rep for International Health Awareness Network and Global Schoolhouse, where we are working on closing the digital divide, which is the new inequality in our global community. And that's what's motivated me to digitize a lot of the science that has been extremely effective in treatment through my ABA Toolbox Circathera efforts. So I'm grateful to be part of this community and be of service and have learned from such great people along the way and be able to have dedicated people join me in these initiatives.
Now, I've always said that it takes more than one perspective to really understand the world of autism. It takes parents, educators, therapists, doctors, even employees and friends. So today I want to look at autism through the multidisciplinary lens. When you think about supporting someone on the spectrum, what's the first thing that comes to your mind in the specific role? Whether it's a therapist, educator, or a parent?
It's a great question because whenever there's something like a diagnosis of autism, when we think about the journey of a parent through receiving that diagnosis, even before receiving that diagnosis, who is involved? Sometimes it's the preschool teachers and the daycare teachers providing feedback about what is happening, what are the challenges and barriers and blocks for that child to progress along with their peers. So already we have the educators in that circle. Then we have additional educators who become involved in the process of schooling. We have nutritionists who get involved. We have physicians who get involved. We have behavior support staff, whether through their ABA therapy, if that's what they seek, or even DI, developmental interventions through early intervention. Then we also have OT, PT, speech, right? And psychologists. So we're looking at one diagnosis, and around that diagnosis is probably 10 well-intentioned types of professionals who are now engaged around that learner. And what does that relationship, how is that helping the learner, right? So there's a lot of different components from before diagnosis to treatment, and all of the different people involved, all the way through discharge, if there is such a thing.
Now, do you find that the understanding of autism has changed over time as you've worked with more autistic individuals?
It has. When we were when I was starting out, there was autism spectrum disorder, and then there was Asperger's. And now Asperger's is part of the spectrum, which is challenging for us as professionals because matching treatment to severity is always key to getting the medical necessity approved for insurance. In addition, the opportunities that are for one part of the spectrum versus the other are very different. So there's treatment and potential, and there's also the different types of individuals that have to be involved really vary. I think the spectrum has really widened, and it's a controversial widening. Many people have different feelings about it, and I do have my own thoughts as well about it.
I know as someone like myself who has been autistic, the world just seems to change. Autism keeps evolving, and I've learned more, and I'm learning more and more of them talking with different people. I mean, I didn't realize that autism, within autism, there's a lot of trauma because depending on the way you were raised in the and the way I've looked at it is a lot of times it's parents putting their own teachings onto their children because of the fact that it's the way they were brought up, and then that brings a lot of trauma onto the child.
Absolutely. I do think that children who are diagnosed now to parents who have maybe gone through the school system earlier in the 2000s, early 2000, may have more sensitivity because of what we have learned about autism. But I do appreciate that the government is shedding a light on autism and whatever, and that is also controversial, but they are finally shedding a light into looking into many different factors. And they're getting pushed back, right? They're getting pushed back to see, they're being called different things, extremists and all of that. But there is definitely light being shed upon it, which I'm glad because more research has to go into it. And what do you think about that? What do you think about the fact that research is now getting highlighted again and funded again for autism treatment
I feel it's good
or diagnosis? Mhm.
because back in the day, there was no real definition of what autism was or how it was caused. Now people are understanding that it's not just from the child, but it's more hereditary. So now they're looking back in that lineage line and saying, if the parents have it, if the parents didn't have it, then maybe the grandparents have it, and it passed down a generation.
And environmental. What we've done to our planet, as human beings is atrocious. We have not taken the best care of Mother Nature in many, many ways for the sake of the industrial revolution and all of that and what it did, right? And now we have to step back and take a look at all the environmental factors, the pesticides in the foods and the different chemicals we use in furniture, all of those things are being looked at now, which I'm glad because there's a 375% rise in autism since the year 2000. Also, the definition of autism has shifted and the diagnostic process has shifted to include more individuals, maybe did not. So there's that. So we have the environmental, we have the genetic studies that are being done currently. Those are all important. I think it's good to have all eyes, all hands on deck, all eyes on the challenges and seeing what can be done and shifted. And I do hope when causality is identified there's enough support to shift things around. If it needs to be more care in the pharmaceuticals and better regulations for better manufacturing, then we should do that. Or if we need to cut back on pesticides on food and have a different pattern, following, more safety guidelines, then we should do that because I don't want to get into those types of debates. That's not my area of expertise. However, I'm grateful that there is a spotlight on it and all leaves are getting turned to see what can be done.
I mean, one of the biggest things I have learned from talking with so many different people, and so many people talk about the mind and the body, how they're all linked together, is that eating is such one of the biggest problems with kids because the parents kind of push them to eat things they don't want to eat, and they don't realize that texture and taste affect are certain things that bother us, and they put their own ways on us until what happens is they wind up with ARFID or anorexia or any of the eating disorders.
Have you found a correlation between autism spectrum disorder and eating disorders in adults?
Not a correlation, but a kind of like the body and the mind go together with autism because I've talked with so many different psychologists and they all say that the mind and body are a lot of those who have autism also have eating problems or have problems with the stomach.
Yeah, I've heard of that from a lot of families saying there's a lot of gut problems. Pica is a challenging behavior that we have to address in some individuals on the spectrum. Food sensitivity, like you mentioned, in terms of texture and having a very limited diet, not exploring different types of foods because of some, I would say, toleration issues, fears and such, so phobias around all of that. So that's certainly something that we have to as behaviorists address, and we want to work bringing it back to the multidisciplinary. We want to work with the feeding specialists and the speech therapists and the OTs to do that. And I do think that programs that are highly effective bring everybody out of their silos and bring them to the table to talk about these and not just behavior terminology, but in terms of the individual on a holistic level. I used to work in Fair Lawn Public Schools, where we won top three in the state of New Jersey. We were a great team because we were highly collaborative. So if we were working on a feeding program, we brought in the OT to discuss, their point of view and speech as well. And we did made sure that the family had medical clearance, right, as part of the process as well. And so we did what we needed to do and gather the data and report it back to the physicians and the OTs and the speech therapists. And it was very learner centered and collaborative. And it was done on a weekly basis, not on a yearly basis in an IEP meeting, but on a weekly basis so that it would be really moving in the same direction together. And I think that programs that do that or encourage that collaboration, it really eases the burden on the family to not be the coordinator of care. That's why we developed ABA Toolbox and Circuit Theras so that we can take the burden off the families to be the coordinators of care, and we can bring that coordination through automation.
Now you talk about collaboration around autistic people. What does that true collaboration look like for you in your field?
For us, it's sharing data, sharing materials, sharing information and initiatives, sitting down in a round table and discussing what are their goals and bringing in intentionality. Now, we don't have the luxury of time. We're in the field working with children who have an intense amount of need for therapy, whether it's 6 hours to 40 hours a week. So what it looks like when it's automated is that it's real time. And that's what we're developing right now with AWS and Amazon's help, because they do see the value in making this automated. So it's super exciting.
Now, are there still gaps in communication between professionals, families, and autistic individuals themselves? Because I know from talking with a lot of people, one of the biggest gaps is dealing with schools and IEPs because it's all a big alphabet soup. It's all these abbreviations and the parents' minds just go, okay, whatever. And they don't think about what really matters. They don't think about bringing the kid in and saying, what do you want?
Yes, it's very difficult. And then there's families sitting in a room full of 10 different professionals. And what they're really discussing in those meetings is how many minutes of those professionals' times they will have, not necessarily getting to the content of what will be done and how it will be coordinated amongst one another. So the value-based care model of that is being really highlighted now doesn't just talk about the amount of time we will spend, but how we will coordinate that time together. And I don't think we have solutions for that are fully defined yet. It's a challenge we're trying to solve for because in every situation it's going to be different. Now, there's situations where a child goes to a private school that doesn't have OT, speech, and they have fantastic behavioral health. So the parents have to go after school and find clinics for OT, speech. Those people's hours are booked. They have wait lists. We have wait lists in our northern New Jersey. The first question parents ask is, well, how long is your wait list? Not how much time do you have for coordinating with my other professionals? How long before I can get my child into the door? And the way that the child feels about it, well, that's a whole nother. At what point did the how old were you when things shifted and people started to ask your thoughts and opinions about your say in the education process? Now I'm asking that, keep in mind, I'm a mom as well, and I have a 13-year-old and a 16-year-old. I don't know how often they get asked in regular ed what their thoughts are about what they're being taught. Maybe at 16, my daughter is starting to make some choices. They get their electives, they choose their electives and such. I don't know if all children have, but at what point at any point did anybody ever ask you what you want to do, what your interests were, what electives you want to choose, how you think you would succeed?
I mean, that brings up a good question is how do we make it so that the autistic person's own voice isn't lost in the mix? I mean, we as people, our opinions matter. This is our education we're talking about. This is how we want to be taught. This is what we need. And along it, like you were saying, the process, it's all about time and how do we prevent those voices from being lost?
I think it's a brilliant topic. And I'll tell you why. Because when I started to study vocational strategies for individuals who are going to transition into the workforce, the checklist for individuals with disabilities, there's some really great things out there that take a look at, do you like to be around people? Do you like to be sitting? Do you like to be behind a screen? Do you like to be walking around, like maybe delivery of mail, maybe working in, a supermarket and having that constant interaction? Maybe not having any interaction and working with just materials. Are we visual? Are we tactile? Are we looking to organize things, or are we looking to? So those checklists that really identify the workflow preferences, we all have workflow preferences. I myself, if I'm working from a remote location, I like to go from three different computers to three different settings throughout the day, so I don't feel like I've stayed in the same spot for 8, 9 hours or 10. That's my workflow. It took me a while to figure that out. I remember feeling very tired at the end of the day, and I was like, you know what? If I start here and then go here and go there, I feel like um, so workflow. I think it as adults so for children, we don't necessarily have that kind of checklist. We have assessments of what they can and cannot do, but we don't necessarily have any kind of an assessment of, do they want to be sitting on the floor to learn? Do they want to be sitting in a group table to learn? Do they want to be learning as they're, walking around to do like maybe conversation skills? Maybe toe to toe, eye to eye is not preferred. Maybe we should be side to side because eye contact makes them uncomfortable. And so responding is like a double-edged variable they have to handle. Not only do they have to respond to questions, but they have to look at me. Well, maybe if we're walking down the hallway, we can eliminate one of those challenges and just walk down the hallway and talk. Maybe they'll learn faster doing that. So I think it's a brilliant idea to bring some of those wonderful assessments that we do for when we're trying to get individuals ready for the workforce, and transition them into early learning as well. Find out what kind of a learner they are, and some kids, they want to take a break and they want to just go walking and run. Some kids, that's an aversive. They'd rather just, preference assessments are being done, but not necessarily for learning, more for motivating.
I mean, you brought up a really good story that happened to me when I was going for my SSI and I finally got a a court date to meet in front of the judge for my appeal and everything. They brought in right at the very end, they brought in a vocational expert and she pulls up this thing with all these different jobs and she's listing them one by one. And my mother's sitting there, nope, he works with people there. He can't work with people. Nope, he works with people there. Every one of those jobs on that list, she goes, he works with some. he's working in a group of people. He can't work with people. He's better off on his own. And at that point, she closed it up, and the judge said, "Thank you." And he's like, "We'll let you know how your verdict was." And at that point, we waited, and then we won.
Wow, that must have been a journey.
It was a journey because with it all, I mean, before even that, the first three times we applied for SSI, I got denied with the exception, with the excuse of I can do menial labor. And the second time, my mom's like, you know what? I'm going to contact a law firm. We called this law firm out in New York, and they're like, here's what you're going to do. You're going to apply. And then the third time on the back of the sheet, it says, do you want to appeal? And you're going to say yes. And you're going to say you want it. You want a representative, you want to perform in court. And so we did that. We got our court date, went in front of the judge, and then met with the jury, but the our lawyer ahead of time, and she's like, okay, here's what's gonna happen. He's gonna talk to you, he's gonna talk to me, then he's gonna ask you questions. And I remember the judge talking to me, and I tell him about my time traveling for Europe and how I panic a lot, and I would get lost, I remember my mother and and our lawyers saying to each other, she's like, we were scared about you talking to him about your travels because we thought that would ruin it, but it didn't. It showed him that, hey, I'm human as well, and I do have problems with navigation, and I get lost a lot.
Yeah, yeah. So taking that time listening to you before it gets to the legal system would have really helped out.
Yeah. I mean, it
Yeah,
I'm sure you know it's a struggle when you want to prove to somebody that you're autistic and they still say, "Oh yeah, you can work," but you can't if you have problems like with trying to know what's right and wrong to say and how to balance what you should and shouldn't say.
absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, and because it's such a spectrum, right? We're dealing with children who are also nonverbal and can't communicate these things for themselves,
Yeah,
right? And we're trying to make decisions as best as we can. However, we're all doing it in silos as a
yeah,
community because we just don't have the luxury of time to collaborate. And we don't necessarily have the luxury of location either. Maybe we're different departments, different buildings, different entities, school versus clinics, right? And an individual is seeing. And then we have the medical team. We don't know what they're doing. And it's just that family that bearing that burden of coordinating and having to navigate the challenges of day-to-day life. It becomes something we really as a society have to solve for because um, someone who's diagnosed with maybe cancer, how many people are in their lives for as part of their treatment and for how long? Autism is a bit different, right? It's longer treatment time for most, and it's I think more people involved. And each of those individuals are, I would say, very much integral determining factors to the child's progress, be it the OT, the speech, the nutritionist, right? You start a whole new diet for a child and then no one knows. Well, why is everything different? You walk into school, the child might not even have like vocal language, or they might, and they're completely not, responding in the same way. They're adjusting to something in the physiological sense, and now they're in an environment they're expected to respond the same way. How come we didn't know? Those kinds of things happen all the time in treatment. And it's
yeah.
again well intentioned, but the coordination takes time. And so when you can bring it into an automated environment, it's life changing.
I mean, you mentioned one thing, and I've talked about this a lot. People don't realize that when we don't look at you, it's not that we don't want to look at you. It's one less stimulation that we can eliminate easily because we have a plethora of things coming in at us all at once. We got sight, we got smell, we got sound, and all of it is hard to control. We can't control sight. We can control sight, but we can't control sound and we can't control smell. So we eliminate one and it makes it easier for us, for our brains to operate better.
And so why can't some instruction be done side by side rather than face to face?
Yeah.
And those are the things that when I read through and studied how to get an individual at the age of 15, 16 ready for the job site, those are great tools to get them to consider all of their different interests. We do preference assessments for reinforcers to find out what motivates a child. Why don't we do the same for what type of learner they are? Maybe when we get them in, it's difficult to find out right away, right? So we expose them to as many different variations as possible. But that's what assessments and continual monitoring is there for, and working together. OT may identify something that they do better when they're not sitting still, or they have a capacity for sitting still for very little bit. But these are the tools that will help them shape up more sitting behavior. But at some point, that child is really, regulated better when they are walking and talking, right? So if social skills are really important, well, let's just walk and talk. And so I think that we're we have a lot of great technology, we have a lot of great initiative. We don't have as much coordination as we should.
Now, in your experience, how valuable is lived experience hearing directly from autistic people and shaping how support or therapy is delivered?
Would you rephrase or ask that again?
In your experience, how valuable is lived experience? Hearing directly from autistic people and shaping how support or therapy is delivered.
So I'm going to repeat that to see if I understand the question. The question is, have we spoken and considered individuals with autism, their opinions,
Yes.
on how they perceive treatment
Hmm.
and the delivery of that treatment?
Yeah.
Not enough. Not enough.
Now,
Yeah.
do you think professionals receive enough training or exposure to actually listen to those experiences instead of working from theory?
Very good question. So I was just speaking with a colleague of mine about this. When I started doing ABA therapy in 97, we had a different level of qualification. And now in 2019, the RBT cert came out. And so there's a whole nother level of training that's required. So for behavioral health, I would say the field may have depreciated just a little bit because people are getting paid half the amount for the same amount of work. And that is something that I don't know how to even, it's a topic that's very confusing because maybe the funding sources cannot sustain. So training and exposing people to more training opportunities, but paying them half the price and expecting the same amount of work. And it's not flower shop work, it's
Mhm.
challenging work. There's accountability, it's healthcare and education. We're dealing with very serious things, like we want to help children reach certain milestones so they can live a fulfilling life. And this is the US. The global community doesn't, in certain parts of the world, we don't even have the luxury of a 1-to-1 or a 2-to-1 or a 3-to-1 type ratio. It's 17-to-1. And the training is completely on a different level. Some countries have it down very well, some don't. And that's the digital divide. That's what, we talk about, the new inequality. The answer is no. The answer is we could always do better. We could always train better. And it's very pockets. It's varied pockets because I was at a Columbia University conference this past Friday and Saturday. And we said, that the science that we have that could improve lives by 4 to 7 times is for a few hundred. What happens to the millions?
Mhm.
Yes, those people are getting trained very well. We have to read research articles. We have to become part. We have to produce research. We have to be part of it. It's intense work to get to be part of that community and train. What happens? So automation and technology allows that to be disseminated without diluting it. So there's a lot of disparity.
Now let's talk a little
And
bit
I
about.
do think that
Well,
one deserves a second part to this, Reed. I don't know how you feel about it, but I think disparity across communities and across even the spectrum of autism treatment. So children with more severe needs versus children who present like they are functioning like, you had to fight to show that this is a
yeah.
challenge for you. Why
Hmm.
did you have to fight? Maybe we can talk about the spectrum as well
Hmm.
as like the pockets that have the luxury of really great care and how dissemination is just so many barriers to it. And we could talk about that next time we meet in a second part. I don't know how you feel about that.
That would be
Lots.
great because I've come across a lot of kids or parents, I should say, who've shown on like Instagram their kids who have astute autism, those who are more severe, like you were saying, those who can't speak, who have the mind of a child and need 24-hour care.
Right.
And being someone who's autistic and seeing this, it's like you can do as much as advocate for them, but there's not much more you can do. You can't help these kids because they're in a mind of their own at that point. And I feel for the parents really because what's going to happen to your child when you're gone?
And that's the struggle that families, start to really deal with, and then they wind up starting up programs, and some cannot do that. Have to find programs, and that is very challenging. But I have seen children who are severely impacted, they have bigger steps to take. They meet those steps much slower with a lot more repetition, but they can learn to be independent. They can learn to rollerblade. They can learn to make snacks and hold down some vocational type positions. Some can and some can't, and the amount of care it takes to get them there takes a level of expertise that not everyone has access to. Right, 40 hours a week of intensive one-to-one with very trained individuals is not accessible. Neither is it sustainable with funding sources. That's why they have cut back. And the value-based care model now requires us to really collaborate, which I'm a fan of. I want that collaboration to happen for many reasons. So yeah, I mean, we are in a world where we're fast moving and slow moving at the same time, right? So we have a
Yeah,
long way to go, and we're identifying the gaps and hoping to make bigger strides so that the severity, the full scale can get the support that they need. Um, I know there's a lot that you can share with me too, and I'd love to hear more about your journey, and how you've come across the spectrum along the way. And I'm excited to hear about your book. So maybe we can talk about that next time as well.
that's great. So let's talk little bit about environments, schools, workplaces, and homes. Which one of these do you feel still struggles the most to adapt to the neurodivergent needs?
All of them.
That's so true because, I mean, I personally feel that parents need to know more about their kids. They just can't, it's not just supporting them, it's learning to work with them, to understand the language of autism, because there are so many ways to do it. And then also there's the fact that, and I've learned this from talking from other guests, that parents don't realize their journey doesn't stop the minute their child gets diagnosed because their own journey keeps going and they need support.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Let's talk about that in the second one as well. If so, we'll talk about all of that. Looking forward to it.
All right, so that is end of part one. I am Reed Miles, and that was Lila Freshen, and I'll see you in the next one, everybody. See you at part two.
Thank you all. Thank
Thank
you.
you.